My name is Mark, a recording angel. I've been observing this earth since the dawn of creation. The Most High has asked me to share my recordings with you. The following are my records of Old Testament prophets and kings, and scheming scoundrels too, collected in this book, Exile of the Chosen, God's Heroes from Solomon to Malachi. If today's recording contains situations which might be uncomfortable for younger listeners, I will mark the video with the words Parental Guidance Recommended.
Chapter 5, Part 2, Aaron. It seemed as if the siege had gone on forever. The skinny street urchins were now starving to death. Even the wealthy could find little to buy. Aaron walked across the courtyard to the kitchen area where his mother was stirring a pot of soup. "What are you preparing?" the boy asked. "Don't ask," his mother snapped. Aaron shook his head. He knew his mother was irritable because she wasn't able to get the things she was used to fixing, but at least their family had food. Both his father and Uncle Jedediah had been fairly wealthy, and what little food was available in the market, they were able to buy. He went and perched on the low wall next to his older brother Adam. "Mother's really upset today," he commented. "The siege is getting to her," Adam said. "It's getting to all of us." "No, it's not," Aaron replied. "We still eat every day. It's the people outside our family compound that are really suffering." Adam sighed. "They're starving to death. But the reason Mother's upset is because she's making donkey head soup." "What?" Aaron asked incredulously. "You don't believe me? Go look in the trash pile behind the kitchen." Aaron hopped off the wall and went to investigate. His brother was right. There were the boiled bones of a donkey's head. "That's disgusting," Aaron exclaimed. "What about all of our rules from Moses about clean meat and unclean meat?" "We're under siege," his brother reminded him. "It isn't so much an issue of clean meat or unclean meat as whether we starve to death or not." The younger boy shuddered. "I guess I would have been happier not knowing." "That's why Mother told you not to ask." Aaron made a face. "You know what the worst thing about it is?" Adam continued. "Not that we're eating a donkey's head, but how much it cost." "We paid money for that?" "What do you think? Everyone is starving. We paid 80 shekels of silver for that donkey's head." "80 shekels!" Aaron exploded. "Don't most workmen get a shekel for a month's work?" Adam sighed. "Yeah," he said, "this would have cost the average workman his earnings for 80 months. Aaron shook his head. He couldn't imagine spending 6.5 years of a grown man's earnings on just the head of a skinny old donkey that was probably as hungry as the people who had slaughtered it. Had God forgotten about them? Again, he shook his head and squared his shoulders. If Father could be an any-way person with his leprosy, then he could be an any-way person and still love God, even if he did have to eat donkey head soup. The siege dragged on. While Aaron's family managed to obtain some food, it was not the kinds of things they used to eat, and he was always sorry when he asked what it was. The laws of Moses about diet had long since been forgotten. His family was now just struggling to survive. What little they had they ate slowly so each meal would last as long as possible. But they were still better off than most families in Samaria. "If things are this bad here," Aaron said to his brother one night, "what do you think is happening to Father?" "I don't know," Adam replied. Aaron rolled away from his brother. Suddenly the whole siege and everything associated with it was just too much to bear. He put his head in his arm and cried silently until he finally fell asleep. The following afternoon, Uncle Jedediah entered the courtyard. "Aaron," he said, "come with me." Glad to be able to be somewhere beside the family home, he asked, "Where are we going?" "Up on the wall." Weak from malnutrition, Aaron followed his uncle. He was thankful that the walls of Samaria were strong and thick. They were wide enough for several people to walk abreast across the top.
"Adam tells me you've been worrying about your father."
The boy stared at the ground. He had hoped that his stepbrother hadn't seen him crying the night before.
"Yesterday, we saw several lepers outside the wall over toward their colony. I thought it would make you feel better to come up here and see. In fact, someone spotted your father yesterday, and although they don't come out much because they're avoiding the Syrians, he's still there. See? Right over there."
Aaron knew where to look. He raised his arm and waved. The man standing outside the caves waved back. His father was still alive. Suddenly Aaron's heart felt lighter. God was taking care of his father. He could even survive the donkey head soup and other terrible things he had to eat, as long as he knew his father was all right. "Do you think the siege will be over soon?" he asked his uncle. Uncle Jedediah looked grim.
"Yes, it'll be over soon. But things aren't going well, and it may not end the way that we had hoped."
"Oh," Aaron whispered. His uncle put his arm around him.
"The Lord takes care of his people even when they lose battles. It's going to be okay. I'll walk you down from the wall, and then I want you to go back home. The king and I have some things to discuss."
Aaron turned to go, but paused. The king and his men were ascending the wall. He stood respectfully waiting for them to pass. Just as he started to leave, a woman shouted, Your Majesty, help me."
"How can I help you?" the king snapped. "If the God of Israel isn't paying attention and isn't going to help you with anything, what do you think I should do about it?"
"You could at least guarantee me a fair treatment for my neighbor," she whined. The king gave a loud sigh.
"Oh, what's the problem?"
"Last week," she said, "we agreed that we would both boil and eat my son, and this week we were going to eat her son." Aaron felt himself begin to retch. "When it was her turn, she'd hidden him. I don't know where he is. It's not fair." The king shuddered. Had it really come to this in his own capital city?
"What do you think I can do if God isn't helping anyone?" he shouted angrily. "I swear that by this afternoon the prophet Elisha is going to pay for this with his life."
He turned to Jotham, his right-hand assistant. Aaron frowned. He knew Uncle Jedediah didn't like that individual at all. The man did anything the king asked him and agreed with him, whether the king's ideas were good or not. Privately, Uncle Jedediah referred to Jotham as the king's pet toad, but of course that wasn't something he would ever say out here on the city wall.
"Jotham," he said, "go get the prophet Elisha. We'll make him pay for this with his life."
Aaron's mouth dropped open. Surely the king would not kill God's prophet.
"Elisha is in his quarters with the elders," Uncle Jedediah interrupted. "He has said that we should wait for word from the Lord, and that whatever God says, we will do." "We've waited long enough for the Lord," the king exploded in anger. "He's the one that has sent this calamity in the first place."
He turned to Jotham.
"Go kill him."
"Yes, Your Majesty." And off he went. Uncle Jedediah frowned and glanced at Aaron.
"Go home," he whispered. "Go straight home, and don't come out again until you know it's safe."
Aaron headed down the steps from the wall. He meant to go home, but his feet took him closer and closer to where the prophet was staying. What would Elisha do? Would the king's servant really kill him? He was just rounding the corner when Jotham banged on the door of Elisha's house.
"Open up in the name of the king,"
he shouted. Then Aaron heard the prophet's voice from inside.
"Look,"
he said.
"Here's a messenger from the king. Grab him and hold him here. His master should be following him shortly."
The men with Elisha opened the door and grabbed Jotham. Aaron grinned. Served him right. Just as the prophet had said, it was only a few minutes before the king rounded the corner.
"This has got to stop. The Lord has refused to intervene and help us. Why should we wait any longer?" he muttered to his guards. I have a message for you, the prophet interrupted. Here is the word of the Lord. This time tomorrow, a whole container full of fine flour will sell for only a shekel, and 2 containers of barley for a shekel in the gates of Samaria.
Even if the Lord made windows in heaven and dumped it on us, this couldn't happen, Jotham replied sarcastically. Elisha turned to Jotham with a cold stare.
You, he said, will see it with your eyes, but you won't taste a single mouthful.
Aaron shuddered. Uncle Jedediah stood next to the king. Suddenly he caught sight of Aaron and glared at him. The boy ran home as fast as he could.
Adam! Adam!
He called. His brother, weak as he was from malnutrition, was trying to clean out what had been the stables. The family no longer had any animals in them.
Adam, the prophet Elisha says that this time tomorrow we'll be buying barley and flour, fine flour, in the gates of Samaria. The siege is going to be over.
The older boy grinned.
I told you,
he said. God'll fix things.
But Adam, I was up on the wall with Uncle Jedediah this afternoon. There are as many Syrians as ever out there. What do you believe God will do to them all? Do you think he'll strike them blind again?
Adam laughed. I don't know, but Jehovah can do anything he wants to, and I'll be delighted to watch whatever it is. I smiled. It was refreshing to find someone in Israel who still believed the Almighty could do anything he wanted. That night Aaron couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned. Finally, just as pink began to streak the sky, he pulled his cloak around him and slipped down to the courtyard. No one else in the family was up yet. Carefully he lifted the heavy bar on the gate and crept out. Wanting to see if he could spot his father again, he hurried to the city wall. Only a few guards remained from the last watch, and they ignored him. Climbing slowly to the top, Aaron followed the wall around to the side that faced the cave where the few lepers lived. Weak from hunger, he had to rest several times. A guard shuffled over and smiled at him kindly.
I knew your father.
Aaron looked at him.
Hey, he's a good man, and he's still out there. We see him pretty often.
The boy smiled despite himself.
The siege has been hard on them, too. We think there's only about 4 left over there. I guess they're as hungry as we are.
The guard's comments sobered the boy. He hated the idea of his father being hungry. Somehow he had been hoping that his father was finding something better to eat than donkey head soup. He looked in the direction of the caves, but saw no one.
Hey, he's not over there, the guard explained. He's up by the wall over there.
He is? Aaron asked. What's he doing up by the wall? That's dangerous. Hurrying as fast as his strength would allow, the boy went to the section of the wall nearest his father and peered down at him.
Father, it's me, Aaron.
His father looked up.
Aaron, I've got wonderful news. You've got to share it with the rest of them.
What?
The boy asked.
There's no one in the Syrian camp.
No one? It still looks as if they're all there.
Well, the tents are all there, but there's nobody in them.
How do you know?
His father laughed.
My friends and I, we've been over there.
You did? Weren't you scared?
Of course. Because we haven't had anything to eat for days, we were talking last night about what we should do. We couldn't stay the way we were. If we came up to the city, chances are we couldn't get in, and if we did, there's no food in there anyway. So we decided to surrender to the Syrians and see if they would give us anything. Only when we got there, everybody was gone.
Everybody?
Honest. The 4 of us ate, and we brought back things and hid them in our cave for later. Everything in the Syrian camp is there. Their tents, their horses, their donkeys. They left everything behind.
The soldier who had talked to Aaron now crowded next to him.
Are you sure?
He called to Aaron's father.
You know, sometimes during sieges they pull back long enough for us to open the gates, and then they attack and break into the city.
Believe whatever you want,
Aaron's father said.
But look at this.
He held up a bag of silver and a gold platter.
Aaron, I want you to lower a basket and I'll send food up.
Yeah, don't bother, the guard said, until we talk to the guards at the gate.
come meet us by the gate." Aaron's father walked toward the gate on the outside of the wall. The boy noticed now that his father's 3 leper friends accompanied him. "Hey, you go to the gate too," the guard told Aaron. "I need to call the king." It was not long before the national and city leaders had all gathered at the gate.
"It's a trick,"
the king declared.
"Who cares?" another countered. "What if we got out there, got some of that food and managed to make it back before they were able to ambush us?"
Uncle Jedediah spoke up.
"Your Majesty," he said, "why don't you let me take some men and the 5 horses we have left? We'll ride out and check it out. If it's an ambush, they'll kill us, but the rest of you will be fine."
The king nodded.
"Take a couple of chariots and scout it out."
As Jedediah and his party rode out the gate, it slammed shut behind them. Aaron staggered back up the steps to watch from the top of the wall. What would happen? Would the Syrians pounce on his uncle? Would he be able to bring some food back before they captured him? As Uncle Jedediah headed toward the Syrian encampment, Aaron held his breath. Less than an hour later, Jedediah returned.
"It's true," he reported. "They're gone and have left everything. The road toward the Jordan River is full of clothes and weapons that they dropped or threw away as they ran. Something must have terrified them."
The king stared down over the wall.
"Did you 4 lepers scare them away?" he asked.
Everyone watching from the wall roared with laughter.
"Open the gates," the king ordered.
The crowd on the wall rushed down the steps. Below, the gatekeepers pulled the gates open, and the swarms of people listening in the streets poured out. Jotham scrambled down as fast as the rest of the mob. As the mass of people surged through the gates, he tripped, and the starving horde trampled right over him.
"Help! Help!"
he cried, his voice lost in the animal-like roar of the starving mob as it thundered on. Aaron stared but could not see Jotham anywhere. Finally, the boy pushed his way through the mass of people to where his father sat happily in the sunshine, watching the city's inhabitants pour out to loot the Syrian camp. Halting, Aaron stared at the ground shyly. His father grinned at him.
"I told you there was a reason," he said. "If I wasn't out here being a leper, we'd all still be in there hungry as could be, thinking that it was a Syrian trick while all this food was waiting for us."
The people swarmed back from the tents with full stomachs and carrying as much as they could. And just as Elisha had predicted, people sold flour and barley cheap in the gates of the city, for they found it everywhere in the tents of the Syrian army. Later the king looked around.
"Whatever happened to Jotham?"
he asked his attendants. "Hey, he's down here," called the gatekeeper who had overheard.
"Well, send him up,"
the king ordered.
"Hey, he won't be going anywhere," the man replied. "The people trampled him to death."
Aaron's mouth dropped open. It was just as the prophet Elisha had said. Jotham had seen everything with his own eyes, but never got a taste of it. The boy shook his head. The God of Israel had done it once again. He was proud to be an anyway person.
This broadcast has come from the book Exile of the Chosen by Sally Pierson Dillon, with permission from the Review and Herald Publishing Association. This book and the rest of the series, War of the Ages, can be purchased by going to www.adventistbookcenter.com or by calling 1-800-765-6955. I'm your narrator, Austin Backus, and this audio project is a gift to you from my free Christian book ministry, RXF 1888. Please visit our website, www.rxf1888.com, to request free Christian books for both kids and adults. And join us here again for more stories from Mark the Recording Angel.